All right, we're almost there. Just one quick reminder, please pick up after yourself as you leave the room, be kind to generous. The other thing is, if you still haven't registered for tonight, the happy hour, please do so. Happy hour and free food, what else can I say? Up next, we're going to be talking about the ransomware evolution. Stepfanie currently serves as a lead CTI analyst at Ernst & Young. She has been part of the intelligence community since 2009 and previously worked with the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center supporting the B-61 Life Extension Program. I don't know what that is, it sounds really cool. And she's been my partner in crime for the past 2 days, so please welcome Stepfanie.
So thanks for that introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all hanging in there on this last stretch of the conference. I really appreciate everybody who stayed and attended all of these workshops and even made badges. I promise to keep this talk light so we can all wrap up and head to the much-awaited after party soon. So today we're going to be taking a journey through the world of ransomware, from its humble beginnings to its current impact on... Sorry, I forgot to connect it. Yay, okay, here we go. Okay, so today we're going to be taking a journey through the world of ransomware, from its humble beginnings to its current impact on cybersecurity. I know as fellow cybersecurity professionals, we've all had our fair share of encounters with ransomware. Consider this a laid-back exploration of how this malware evolved and where we find ourselves today. We won't be diving into the weeds. Instead, we'll be focusing on a high-level overview of the ransomware landscape. This is our agenda for today. I'll start with a brief introduction about myself and role in the cybersecurity field. Next, we'll define ransomware. We all have encountered it in some form, but it's always good to start with a definition just to get on the same page. We'll then move on to the mechanics of ransomware. We'll go through the typical life cycle of an intrusion. To put things into perspective, we'll take a step back and look at the origins of ransomware. We'll cover some of the earliest known attacks and how they paved the way for where we are today. Then we'll spend some time going through trends from 2010 to present. Finally, we'll look to the future. All right, let's dive in. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of ransomware, let me take a moment to introduce myself and give you a bit of my background. I'm sorry, Kristen gave me a laser pointer, but I think it's right here in my pocket. Okay, so my name is Stepfanie Roberts, and I'm currently a lead CTI analyst at Ernst & Young. So it's a Big Four accounting firm. We provide managed services to different clients. So that's my current role. Prior to working at EY, I spent some time at a small startup company in Colorado Springs. It's called Route 9B. It was actually purchased by Deloitte, and so I still have some friends that work for Deloitte, so there's that bit of competitive rivalry between the Big Four accounting firms. I'm pretty sure Deloitte's number one and EY's 3, but that's okay. And before I got into CTI, I worked at the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center supporting the B-61 Life Extension Program on Kirtland Air Force Base. It's some really interesting stuff. I really miss my time there. It was a good job. I proudly am representing Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm born and raised. I graduated from Sandia High School and briefly attended the University of New Mexico before taking a detour into the Army. And so fun fact about me, I once serenaded Albuquerque with my violin when I was in the Albuquerque Symphony program. For those of you who don't know, it's just a orchestra program for high school, middle school, and elementary school students. And when I'm not reading up on the cyber threat landscape, I'm wrangling my son, who you can see there, and our 4 dogs and our 4 cats. But now that you know a bit about my New Mexico roots and my squad at home, let's dive into ransomware. So what exactly is ransomware? So ransomware is a type of malicious software. So think about it as a digital kidnapper, but instead of taking your dog, it takes your files hostage and locks you out of your house. Once it infiltrates a device, it doesn't just stop there. It spreads its reach, not only looking for files on the initial device, but also checking and seeing if there's any additional connected devices it can access. The goal of ransomware is to render your system unusable by encrypting your files. You can't access your data, and the only way you can get it back is to pay a ransom. It's like waking up to find out that your car has been booted and you need to pay a fine to get it removed. Ransomware isn't the work of just one type of criminal. It's deployed by a range of threat actors with different motives and levels of expertise. From highly skilled cyber criminals to less sophisticated script kiddies, the spectrum is pretty broad. Some of the main culprits behind ransomware intrusions are cyber criminals looking for a financial gain or nation states aiming for strategic advantages. We also hear about hacktivists, insiders, and script kiddies, but that's kind of like comparing the mafia to the occasional shoplifter. So now that we've defined what ransomware is and its role in cyber threat landscape, let's take a closer look at how it actually works. And this is just a general intrusion cycle. It will differ, but generally speaking, ransomware attacks typically start with an intrusion. So this is like the burglar picking the locks on your front door, or perhaps you've left that door unlocked. The attacker gains unauthorized access to your system through various means. So these are going to be those phishing emails, malicious attachments, or exploiting software vulnerabilities. So imagine receiving an email that looks completely legit from your friend, but once you click on the link, you can wittingly invite the burglar into your house. Once inside, the ransomware gets to work, encrypting your files. It's like the burglar's not just stealing your valuables, but also changing all the locks in your house so you can't get back in. The malware scans your system and encrypts important and sensitive files, making them inaccessible to you. It's basically locking you out of your own digital house. Sorry, we're on ransom demand. After locking up your files, the attackers present their ransom demand. This is the part where the burglar leaves a note saying, pay up or you'll never see your stuff again. They typically demand payment in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to maintain their anonymity, and they don't take credit cards or checks, only cold hard digital cash. So moving to decryption. If you choose to pay the ransomware, the attackers may provide you with a decryption key, or you may not ever get a decryption key. There's no guarantee that paying the ransom will actually get your files back. So it's like trusting that same burglar who broke into your house and changed the locks to leave the new keys under the doormat. You hope for the best, but you're never quite sure what's going to happen. And now we're on post-ransom activities. So even after a ransom is paid and files are decrypted, the nightmare isn't necessarily over. Attackers might leave backdoors in your system for future exploitation, or sell your compromised data on the dark web. It's like finally getting back into your house only to realize that they left a window open for future visits. So now that we've explored how ransomware operates, let's take a step back and look at where it all began. I firmly believe in understanding the origins of these types of things just because it helps you plan better in the future. Okay, so this is the AIDS Trojan. So let's take a trip back to 1989. This is when Joseph Popp, who was an evolutionary biologist, decided to channel his frustration creatively. After being denied a position at the World Health Organization, he didn't grumble about it. He created the AIDS Trojan because the next logical step when your job application gets rejected is to create ransomware. To spread this creation, Pop mailed 20,000 floppy disks to attendees at the WHO's AIDS conference. So for those who remember, floppy disks were the vintage storage devices of the pre-USB era. These disks were distributed with a leaflet that warned recipients about potential harm from the disk's code. The recipients didn't have anything to worry about, though, because they could pay the PC Cyber Corporation to fix the issue caused by inserting the floppy disk. Once the disk was inserted, the system would become encrypted or locked, and to regain access, victims had to send $189 to a P.O. box in Panama. Yes, Panama. Because nothing says trustworthy like mailing a ransom payment to an anonymous address in a foreign country. So now that we've covered the origins of ransomware with the AIDS Trojan, let's dive a little deeper into the specifics of what made this early form of ransomware tick and where it fell short. So the first feature, anonymity. So this was intended to be a key feature with payments sent to a P.O. box in Panama to hide Pop's identity. This didn't last long though, and we'll get into that when we discuss the limitations. Next up, we have delivery via mail. Pop used the U.S. Postal Service to distribute the floppy disks. So using the U.S. Postal Service for this might have been a crime called mail fraud. So that was another limitation, but also a feature. And next up we have encryption. And so while this was a feature of the AIDS Trojan, there were also limitations into this as well because the same key was used as the encryption and decryption key. As previously stated, POP required the money to be sent to a Panamanian account. And this is to maintain anonymity, but also to obscure the money trail. There is no record, though, of a significant payout, and this isn't really considered to be a successful, from a financial perspective, exploits. Next up, we have the ransom note. This would be the leaflet that came with the disks. It outlined the steps the victim needed to take to regain access to their files. It's like saying, pay up or you'll never see your awkward prom photos again. And this last feature we'll discuss is social engineering. This was actually relied heavily upon because POP exploited the trust of the conference materials and recipients' willingness to insert the disks into their computers. Okay, so now we'll move to limitations. So first off, one of the significant limitations of the AIDS Trojan was its use of symmetrical encryption. The same key was used for both encrypting and decrypting the data. So this means that once investigators had the key, they could easily unlock the encrypted files. Additionally, the operation wasn't cheap. POP spent around $100,000 on floppy disks alone, not to mention the international postage fees. So if you adjust for inflation, that's about $260,000 in today's money. I don't know about you, I don't have $260 laying around to take out a grievance on a company that rejected a job application. Next, despite his efforts to maintain anonymity, Pop was quickly identified and arrested within a year. So those 20,000 floppy disks that he sent out, he left his return address on those. And so they were able to, take that back to him as evidence and, hey, this is you. There were other aspects of the investigation as well. So having explored the features and limitations of the early AIDS Trojan, let's fast forward and take a look at how ransomware evolved from 1990 to 2000. So we're just going to start with these pink boxes and then we'll go back to these yellow ones. So in 1996, there are these two researchers, Adam Young and Modi Young. They're spelled differently, but I have it on the slide. They introduced the concept of applying asymmetric cryptography to malware. This was initially as a warning, and it was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because they gave that tool to cyber criminals developing ransomware. But this marked a significant step forward because asymmetric cryptography uses two different keys, one for encryption and one for decryption, making it harder for victims to unlock their files without the private key. And so we'll move to 1999. So this is the Melissa virus. This was a macro virus that targeted Microsoft Word and Outlook-based systems and spread through phishing emails. The virus used social engineering techniques, tricking recipients into opening a document that claimed to be a list of passwords to adult websites. Once opened, the virus would email itself to the first 50 contacts in the victim's address book. It was one of the first instances where social engineering was effectively used to distribute malware on a large scale. And now we'll move to 2000. So in 2000, 24-year-old Omel de Guzman decided to create a virus that stole credentials for internet access. De Guzman lacked the funds to pay for access for himself and decided to take it from others. It is believed that he had intermittent access to the internet through shared resources or public access points, and this allowed him to initially launch the virus. So his attack was prominent for several reasons, but notably because he used phishing emails for delivery. The email played on the universal fascination with romantic love, with the subject line, "I love you," and an attached VBS file named "Love Letter for You." It promised happiness and thrill that were hard to say no to. The "I love you" virus spread rapidly, originating from the Philippines, which, shout out to my people. For those of you who don't know, I'm half Filipino. And it reached the U.S. within just 5 hours, so it eventually impacted 45 million users. On its way across the world, it hit notable institutions like the British Parliament, Pentagon, and Ford Motor Company. The global damages were estimated to be 8.7 billion, with another 15 billion spent for remediation efforts. Email transmitted malware wasn't new. We discussed the Melissa virus previously, but none had reached the success rate of "I love you." And now we're going to go back a bit to 1983. This was when the development of digital cash, or eCash, began enabling user anonymity. This was crucial for ransomware, as anonymous transactions made it harder for law enforcement to trace money back to the attackers. So it's a cyber equivalent of using an unmarked briefcase full of cash. So think of it like the Zoom of digital currency, way ahead of its time and paving the way for future innovations. And for those of you who might have forgotten, Zoom was Microsoft's digital media player, a competitor to the iPod with some advanced features that never quite took off. I really liked mine. And then in 1998, DigiCash, an early digital cash company, went out of business. However, the concept of eCash didn't die with it. It laid the groundwork for the emergence of Bitcoin in 2008, which would later become the preferred cryptocurrency for ransomware payments due to its anonymity. So it's like how Zoom walked so Spotify can run. DigiCash's early ideas set the stage for Bitcoin's success. So now that we've seen how ransomware began to take shape in the 90s, let's move to the next decade and see how global digitization and increased connectivity facilitated the rapid spread of ransomware from 2000 to 2010. And so this is just a graph of number of internet users. You can see that it's grown, and it still grows, just cuts off in 2010. So with the turn of the millennium, the world was getting more connected than ever. Global digitization and increased internet connectivity meant that ransomware could spread faster and farther. It was like watching the internet go from dial-up to hyperspeed. So some of the key highlights during this era is that ransom demands were surprisingly low. Some threat actors asked for $20 for code decryptors, It's like the threat actors are just testing the waters and seeing if they can make a quick buck without scaring off too many victims. Additionally, cyber criminals during this time favored a quantity over quality approach. Instead of meticulously crafting a few high-quality attacks, they sent out as many as possible, hoping some would stick. So it's like throwing darts in the dark. Plenty of misses, but every so often they hit a bullseye. And then in 2006, ransomware took a significant leap forward with the addition of AES and RSA encryption. This was like upgrading from that dollar store lock to a high-tech biometric system. Cyber criminals were getting more sophisticated and their attacks were becoming harder to crack. One particularly interesting method of payment during this time was asking victims to purchase goods from an online pharmacy to get their decryption keys. Imagine having to buy cough syrup to unlock your files. So having navigated through the early days and evolution of ransomware up to 2010, let's move to the present era. The last decade has seen ransomware threats becoming more sophisticated and widespread, driven by new technology and global events. I do want to caveat that there are some major events that are not listed up here. I'm just trying to highlight some of the ones that I found more notable. You could disagree with this, and everyone has their perspective on things. But I'll go ahead and jump into this. So in 2013, CryptoLocker introduced us to the joy of paying ransom payments in Bitcoin. So it's like the cyber criminal said, why not just use the currency of the future? Bitcoin provided a secure, untraceable way to receive money, making it the perfect match for ransomware payments. And then in 2015, ransomware went corporate with the emergence of ransomware as a service model. And so on that note, some of these ransomware operations and some of these threat actors that you see, they might come from the same family. Wizard Spider is one that Conti used to belong to, and they used to be divided up into different teams. They have their own customer support system and operate like a legitimate business, except they're not. But top threat actors started offering free kits to aspiring cyber criminals. So it was like a DIY home improvement kit. Want to start your own ransomware empire? Here's everything you need, no experience required. Okay, and then in 2019, Mace threat actors decided that just locking up your data wasn't enough. They began pioneering the double extortion method, where they extracted data before encrypting systems. The purpose of extracting the data was to pressure victims into paying the ransom, otherwise they would publish it on their leaked sites. And then we're moving to the dark ages. During the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, ransomware attacks surged, particularly targeting healthcare organizations. Cyber criminals exploited healthcare's critical role during the crisis. I should note that there are a few threat actors out there with a code of conduct who avoid targeting, say, children's hospitals, but unfortunately not everyone operates with the same or any principles. And then moving along to 2021, Conti ransomware took things up a notch with triple extortion tactics. They not only encrypted data and threatened to release it, but they began targeting victims, clients, and partners. In other instances, threat actors threatened to conduct distributed denial of service attacks against victims who did not pay the ransom demands. By 2023, ransomware attacks have become so relentless that some victims were hit by dual intrusions within a short time frame. I remember the FBI released a notification, I think in September, about the increase in these, and then I began seeing them as I began collecting data for some kind of briefs to some of my clients. So thanks to ransomware as a service groups and the ability to purchase these with little to no technical expertise, individuals can purchase these subscriptions across multiple variants and then conduct repeated intrusions on the same victim. So this would be like getting mugged twice on the same street. just when you think you've recovered, another attacker comes along. So now that we've explored notable trends up to the present day, let's look ahead and discuss what the future holds for ransomware. So there are 6 different items on the slide. We won't cover all of them, but I'll caveat that most of these are already happening to some degree. I know that AI is a hot topic right now, and it's something that threat actors will continue to use to enhance their campaigns. During one of the panel discussions, it was mentioned that phishing emails are becoming more convincing, the language is improving, they're looking much less obvious, they're looking much less like those scams from the past. It's no longer about spotting the glaring errors. It's like they've hired a professional copywriter. The recommendation in the past would have been to look for those grammatical errors, but now it might be to look for emails or to scrutinize emails a little more that seem a little too proper. And again, on the AI point, we had a speaker earlier talk about using ChatGPT to conduct research onto their victims. That is another thing that is just going to happen. Another point that I'll cover is the expansion of ransomware as a service. It enables less technical threat actors to conduct these attacks. It's possible. During some of my research, I saw this on a lesser extent, so I'm not really sure if it was. I'm not sure if it was coordinated, but maybe ransomware as a service expands to not dual intrusions, but maybe triple intrusions. And then lastly, we'll focus on government and regulatory responses. New laws and regulations will aim to enhance cybersecurity standards and impose stricter penalties on cyber criminals. In February, there was a joint effort that disrupted LockBit. I know that doesn't really seem to be going too well because LockBit is still very much active. But this is really a partnership throughout the world, just because these groups are pretty bad, and what they're able to do could really bring down a lot of companies. But with that is my presentation. Thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Hi, thank you for the talk. My impression is that the ransomware started off kind of small, and that it kind of hit smaller, like less well-defended organizations. But that over the years it's been getting bigger as they get more money, they can invest in new technology, and that it's actually getting to be hitting larger and then better known companies. Do you see that continuing? Do you have any ideas around that?
So what I've kind of seen from ransomware intrusions and what threat actors are doing. So with ransomware as a service, you have your affiliates. You have your affiliates distributing the ransomware. They're getting creative with what they do. They're kind of throwing things at the wall, seeing if they'll stick. And then once something sticks, then a bunch of other groups start adopting that same type of tactic. I can't think of any of those right now. But I know that ransomware affiliates and threat actors, they're also watching what they're doing because they want that same success. And if they're able to adopt it, then they'll adopt it. Hope that answered it.
I was wondering if you know of or if you think of any specific preventative measures specifically for ransomware, not so much about generally preventing malware to begin with, but specifically ransomware. Thank you.
So a lot of the mitigations are going to all overlap with general malware mitigation. So keeping your systems up to date, having multi-factor authentication enabled, user education, network segmentation. A lot of the best practices that are pushed in the industry, that's not going to cover you from just one type of threat. That's going to be beneficial for a bunch of different types of threats. there's no more questions, I'll pass this back to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Stephanie.